So a couple of days ago, I appeared on Finding Gnosis's live stream because I saw that he was live, and we ended up talking about my new job because I work as a care worker. And I gave my unfiltered thoughts on what I'd had to do and what I'd seen so far. Currently, I've only worked 3 days as a care worker. I can't say at this point how long I'll keep at the job. It's not an easy job. It's definitely not for everyone. It is challenging, but it's not challenging in the sense that it's physically exhaustive, because I mean, I had to quit my job with Royal Mail mainly for that reason. But it is definitely challenging in other ways, because if you're not the kind of person who's of a stoic and calm professional temperament, then you're going to be confronted with some grim realities of life and nature and what happens to people when they outlive their biological expiration date. Because not everyone, newsflash, not everyone ages gracefully. My grandparents, who are in their 90s, are incredibly lucky. They're both physically mobile, they're both sound of mind, you can hold a decent conversation with them. And honestly, I wish everyone could age like that, but sadly, not everyone has the same fate. There's all kinds of horrific diseases and conditions that can happen to you, and some of them are genetic, some of them are... you have them before you're even born, and there's nothing you can do. So to give you an example of the things I had to do as a care worker, I had to look after a gentleman who'd had a stroke, and half of his entire body was paralyzed. So he was not able to lift his left arm. He wasn't even able to smile or talk out the left side of his mouth. And whenever he spoke, it would sound like he'd had too much to drink. So it wasn't always easy to listen to what he had to say, and sometimes you had to ask him to repeat himself, or just nod and smile, pretend you understood him. But strokes are no joke. Strokes are really serious, because they're basically the brain's equivalent of a heart attack. It's and if the brain is starved of oxygen, this is serious, because parts of the brain will die out if they don't get enough oxygen, and this can be fatal. And if it's not fatal, it can be devastating in the sense that there are bodily functions that you won't be able to do anymore, like walk or use your left arm or even speak properly, and it can leave you in almost a vegetative state. And half the people who I treat, 2 of them at least, are that way because they've had a stroke, and they're completely bedridden. So we have to do everything for them. We have to lift them in and out of bed and into their chairs. We have to do pad changes, or nappy changes. We have to clean up after them whenever they have a bowel movement. And it is gross. Some of them we have to empty the catheter. And for God's sake, don't look up catheter if you're not curious of what that is, because I wish I could go back to the person I was before I heard what the word catheter was and what it's used for. Yeah, I have a phobia of that. But anyway, that is the grim nature of reality. That's the nature of life, and I'm not going to complain, because it's not like I wasn't aware that this is what I was getting into as a care worker. And as a person, I do feel like I've become more resilient by exposing myself to these absolutely horrific, debilitating conditions brought about by old age, stroke, or people who've had or dementia. And good God, man, dementia's pretty awful as well. It's exactly what it is like. I promise you, if you've ever seen how old people with dementia are portrayed in the media and TV, I can assure you it's no exaggeration. One of the service users who I was responsible for, he was an elderly man in his 90s. He used to be a dock worker in Southampton, but he's since progressed to late stage dementia. Obviously, we have to do the fundamentals, personal care for him. And he asked me, for the entire half hour we were there, he kept asking the same question 6 times. He asked me who I was. He kept saying, "Who's that tall bloke over there?" And we kept having to tell him, that's Benjamin, your new care worker. So it's no joke. Dementia, literally, it rots your brain from within. And I spoke earlier, I have a friend, and formerly he used to be a neighbor, who actually had to care for his own father who had late stage Alzheimer's. And I can't even imagine what that must be like. And he told me psychologically this has fucked him up. It's fucked him up to the point where he doesn't even want to have children anymore, because he's worried that by doing that the same thing will happen. Or in his words, the reason why he doesn't want to have children is because he's already lived the experience. He's had to change his dad's nappies, he's had to help him get dressed and brush his teeth. Yeah, honestly, no matter how bad I thought my father had it when I was losing him, you got to count your blessings sometimes, because not everyone dies with their dignity intact. But yeah, there's a lot of things like that that you have to deal with when you're a care worker. And as I was saying, by subjecting myself to this line of work, it's not a glamorous profession, but someone has to do it. You can't just... We don't live in a perfect world. We haven't yet reached the point where AI and robotics have automated all of the terrible jobs that no one wants to do. So we do need human care workers. And that's why I feel if it has to be done, well, I might as well give it a try. Although I'm not going to pretend that the fact that the Isle of Wight, that there aren't a lot of jobs around here on the Isle of Wight other than care worker stuff, because so many elderly people live here. So if you want a job, well, you don't have much choice. I'm not going to pretend like that didn't factor into it. Also, yeah, I talked about the spiritual aspect and how that's making me a more resilient and compassionate person. But also, another thing about care workers is, because our government is lazy, what they tend to do is, one of the reasons why we have so many immigrants come over here is because we need care workers. And being a care worker is regarded as a lowly profession. It's a job that basically anyone can do, and most people don't want to do it. So our government uses that to justify, as a rationale, to justify having hundreds of thousands of unskilled or semi-skilled immigrants from poor countries to come over here to do care worker jobs. Some of them don't even legally have a right to live and work here. And that's the thing, if you go on BBC Question Time and you hear what those elites, those bigwigs, those talking heads on the TV always say, they say, we need NHS nurses, we need care workers. That's why we need all this cheap foreign labour to come here. Obviously, that doesn't answer the fundamental problem of what do we do when those people get old and need care workers? Do we just keep adding more and more young people to our population? Is it like... because our whole economic system is a Ponzi scheme, it's a pyramid scheme, and also who's going to look after the young people, where the countries where they come from, who's going to look after their parents if not their children? And what does it say about our society, the individualistic nature of Western civilization, if we don't care for our elderly but we rely on cheap foreign labor to do it? What does that say about us as people? I didn't like caring for my father while we were losing him to cancer, but I still had to do it because who else was going to do it if not me, his son? And another thing I would say is, by taking on the job of being a care worker, I'm rebelling against the system, because I'm denying a job that could otherwise be offered to an illegal immigrant. So that's how I justify it, you know? I'm stealing opportunities from poor people from other countries. Yeah. Way to go, me. But really, I think we should give more, I think care workers and NHS nurses should get paid more money. I haven't talked about this a lot in my other videos, but I consider myself a socialist. I'm not one of those crazy, fanatical socialists who has a nose ring and blue hair and LGBT, and I want to steal the means of production and stuff like that. And I don't have a copy of Karl Marx's Das Kapital in my bedroom, nothing like that. But no, I'm a socialist in the sense that I feel like our whole economic model just isn't working. It's not working for ordinary people. It doesn't serve the interests of the nation state or any of the people who are in it. It only serves the rich. It serves the people who are fortunate, who are blessed enough to be highly intelligent, to have a certain personality type, and who have a very niche set of skills that are considered valuable in our economic system. So it would make no sense under our economic system to pay care workers more money or to mandate an increase in wages. But we should do it anyway because it's an example of us conferring a level of status or value on what should really be considered a valuable profession. Now, I don't care what anyone says, we need nurses, we need care workers, even though it is a gross job, or precisely because it's a gross job, not everyone wants to do it. So if you're one of those few who will willingly subject themselves to the indignities of wiping old people's asses, or, God forbid, cleaning an old woman's cunt, I haven't done that yet, but I've seen it been done. It does happen. It happens quite a lot. Well, then you're a special person, and really, I do think that they deserve a pay rise, even if it doesn't make economic sense, because it's an example of our civilization conferring value on conferring status on what it values. And it would be good for us as a civilization, as a society, if we did things like that. And that's why I do have a lot of respect for the NHS. I like the NHS in principle. I don't like what it is now. I don't like how it's basically become a gigantic money pit where all of our taxes go and no one knows where the money goes and nobody ever gets the treatment and the care they need. But if you ever watch BBC Question Time or anything from our telly, whenever you hear people like NHS junior doctors or care workers talking about how there's not enough funding for our NHS, or we need more care workers, we need a pay rise, even though they believe in a host of other nonsensical and ridiculous ideas that make no practical or economic sense, like we need more immigrants to take these jobs, thus undermining the value that the job provides, or we need to stop racism, or we need more multiculturalism in education and stuff like that. Broadly speaking, I agree with the principle that we need to increase wages for these professions because of the reasons I talked about earlier, because it's a sign that we're conferring value and status on what we need to see more of, which is nursing, care work. It's a noble profession and it should be seen that way, and that's why I think at the very least the minimum wage for these kinds of jobs should be something like 15 or 16 pounds, although I guess we can look into what the cost of living is like depending on where you live and stuff like that. But yeah, I have a great deal of respect for the NHS and care workers. However, currently the NHS is in a dire state. It's completely unsustainable. It's become a gigantic money pit where we chuck money and we set the money on fire. Nobody is getting the treatment that they deserve. I mean, one of the reasons why my dad got his stage 4 cancer diagnosis is because they took too long to diagnose him. The thing with cancer is the earlier you diagnose it, the better your odds are of surviving. So if you've got a gigantic, bureaucratic, labyrinthine system where no one knows what they're doing, there's too many idle staff that are in these complex networks of of relationships where nobody knows what to do or who to answer to, and especially if there are these ridiculous positions that don't make any sense, like diversity nurse or whatever, who are siphoning off taxpayer money. I'm not a huge expert at looking at facts. I'm not an accountant, but honestly, with all the money that we are putting into our NHS, you'd think that we'd be getting value for it, but something doesn't quite add up. In the distant past, did you know that long ago, we used to have healthcare that was free at the point of delivery? We used to have dentistry that was covered under the NHS. It used to be the case that you didn't need to pay money to see the dentist, but that's all changed. And it's changed, and this is for a number of reasons, but I think some of the main reasons include bureaucracy, obviously, because now we have all these ridiculous institutions, many of which came into existence when Tony Blair became Prime Minister, which look good in theory. They provide a framework of rules and regulations to behave by, but in reality, all they do is they hamper expert opinion when it's needed. They impose a set of rules and standards which don't always apply, and they take up so much time and money. And the worst thing is, because we're getting so many immigrants to come here, and contrary to what you might hear, not all immigrants are coming here to work. Really small numbers. It's really, most of them are not here to work. Most of them are here to basically live off government largesse, to claim benefits and work in the black economy, you know, as Deliveroo or Uber Eats drivers. I mean, if anyone who's ever seen those Turkish barber shops or those vape stores that are all around the town, it's because they're basically criminal. They're criminal organizations, all of them. A lot of them involve illegal immigrants and stuff like that. But basically, it's a problem where the rot, it goes all the way to the top. It starts there, and until the system itself changes, we're not going to be able to fix our NHS. Because even though the NHS is in a lot of problem, there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of corruption, none of it's going to go away unless the government itself changes, because the government is 100% responsible for it. Not just the government, though, the Cabinet Office, the civil service. So many people in the civil service they're raking in a fortune by siphoning off taxpayer money from what should really rightfully be ours. And that's why nobody's getting the healthcare treatment that they deserve. Because the whole system is in dire need of an upheaval. And it's little wonder why we see such an incredible turnover with jobs like being a care worker. But I feel like this would all change if our society were to change. But until that revolution happens, we're not going to see that kind of change. So more and more people who are vulnerable are going to be left by the wayside. But more than that, it's not just that our government needs to change. I think we as people need to change. We need to be more open to the idea of looking after and caring for our families when they get old and when they can't look after themselves. It would be good for us, for ourselves, and of course it would be good for them, because my grandparents are the sweetest and loveliest people in the world. I'm going to be really sad when they finally, when I lose them. It's a tragic but unavoidable part of life. But again, I think being a care worker can help you come to terms with death.